All right, Broncos country, we are live. Let's just go ahead and make sure that everything is nice and stable all across the YouTube platform before we officially get into things. Welcome into the pregame tailgate for Week 15, Denver Broncos versus Detroit Lions. The Denver Broncos currently sitting at 7-6, head into the Motor City to take on the 9-4 NFC North leading Detroit Lions, a team that has kind of sputtered over the course of the last couple of weeks. Both teams are desperately looking for the win. The Broncos are looking to keep their AFC West playoff hopes alive, or their AFC West championship hopes alive. Their playoff hopes will take a hit if they lose this game, but they still have a pretty strong chance to get in if they win out, if they do indeed lose this game. But the Broncos don't want to even talk about that. They are taking this as a one game at a time approach, and the Broncos are looking to go into Detroit and keep their AFC West championship hopes alive. All right, guys, before we get started, we've got David in the house. Game day, is PJ Locke playing or is he out? As DS answered, PJ Locke is indeed playing. Apparently, he took a shot to the throat. According to Andrew Mason, Broncos beat reporter for 104.3 The Fan, he was kind of struggling to talk in the locker room after the Chargers game, so he took a little bit of a hit to the windpipe, I guess. He got tested pregame, and he is all good to go, so PJ Locke is going to play. The inactive should be released here in just a couple of minutes. We got Tyler Lancaster, who was also called up from the practice squad, as DS says here. We'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. They also brought up another player from the practice squad today for a fairly interesting reason. And then we've got Jaquan McMillan. I can't get over how good Jaquan McMillan is. DS says. We've got Kenny in the house saying, Broncos, I believe always will, baby. Absolutely. You've got to maintain that faith, got to maintain that belief. I know me as an analyst, I can kind of look at things from an objective point of view and kind of realize that this may not be the best matchup for the Denver Broncos, but I know that there are plenty of others in Broncos country that are going to keep the faith. I know I need to. At least the fan side of me needs to. But we're going to talk about this matchup for the Denver Broncos because I really could see this game go either way. Let's settle down those kitties, DS says. I definitely need to eat crow because Vance Joseph has done a heck of a job. I absolutely agree. Vance Joseph's defense has been one of the most remarkable transformations really in the entirety of football. Brett Coleman made a video that highlighted it. Obviously, the main differences were the personnel changes, shipping out Frank Clark and Randy Gregory, benching Damari Mathis, shipping out Essane Bassie as well, bringing in guys like Fabian Moreau, Jaquan McMillan, more Mike Purcell up front, just various things like that. Obviously, the young edge rushers, Baron Browning, Nick Benito. Unfortunately, Nick Benito is not going to play in this game with his knee injury that he suffered against the Los Angeles Chargers. So that is a big blow to the Denver Broncos pass rush. That could potentially spell trouble here for a Broncos team that has done a really good job getting home and getting after the quarterback. A lot of that has been with blitzes, and the Lions actually are a pretty good matchup when it comes to the blitz. Jared Goff is not very good against the blitz. We'll talk about that in just one moment. We got DS saying Dulcich is the next Greg Oden, except Greg Oden achieved a lot more than Dulcich. I'm not exactly sure who Greg Oden is, honestly. Bengals won against Minnesota. Unfortunately, they did, and that did unfortunately hurt the Broncos' playoff chances a little bit. The Bengals are actually currently sitting, I believe, at the 7th seed. The Broncos can play their way, I believe, into the 7th seed if they win tonight. And right now, the Indianapolis Colts and the Pittsburgh Steelers, I believe Indianapolis is leading still 21-13. I haven't looked up. Yes, they sure are. 10 minutes left in the third quarter in that game. Pittsburgh stomped out to a 13-0 lead, and then Indianapolis has come out and scored 21 unanswered points. We got Merlot in the house saying, a win today means we stopped the run. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Again, we'll be getting into all those matchups in just one second, but I strongly believe the Lions are going to run the football down Denver's throat because that's the most natural way to counter the blitz. Neil says, we are unstoppable. Let's go. Gotta believe, man. Absolutely gotta believe. I think that the Denver Broncos do a lot of things well that could give this Detroit Lions team trouble, but conversely, I think this Detroit Lions team does a lot of things well that could give the Denver Broncos some trouble. We got Maverick in the house, formerly Antelope, awesome, saying, I got a new profile pic featuring McMillian and PS2. That's awesome, man. Welcome, man. I'm probably still going to end up calling you Antelope, to be honest. Drew Sanders at outside linebacker. That is probably going to be what we're going to end up seeing here without Nick Benito, because Drew Sanders can at least provide some speed off the edge, which we are sorely going to miss with Nick Benito not playing in this game. We got Kenny saying Denver 27, Lions 20. What coach would you want, Sean or Dan? Personally, I would want Sean Payton because of his track record, but either way, you cannot go wrong, quite frankly. What Dan Campbell is doing in Detroit is nothing short of phenomenal. The way he has turned around the culture in that locker room and has completely changed the outlook of that entire organization, it's just nothing short of incredible. But obviously, Dan Campbell is a Sean Payton disciple. He was the assistant head coach for many years in New Orleans under Sean Payton. So those two are very similar in their coaching styles. They're sort of brash, tough love approach. But Dan Campbell is a guy that definitely, I feel like, has a little bit more of a softer side to him than Sean Payton does. He's not quite as gruff around the edges as Sean Payton is. Dan Campbell does give off almost like that meathead personality, but deep down he really cares for his guys. I'm not saying that Sean Payton doesn't, he absolutely does, but I almost feel like Dan Campbell more openly displays it than Sean Payton, if that makes any sense. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and dive into this matchup today. First of all, we're going to start off with how this Denver Broncos defense is going to match up against the Detroit Lions offense. This Broncos defense over the last couple of weeks has really taken on an identity of an aggressive style of defense that is heavy blitzing and heavy pressure on the quarterback, and that is something that the Detroit Lions have actually kind of struggled with. If we come over here and take a look at Pro Football Focus, Jared Goff, when kept clean, is one of the best passing quarterbacks in the entire NFL. He's got a 90.9 PFF grade when he's kept clean. When he's not blitzed, he's 89.7 grade, which is still obviously really phenomenal. But when he's under pressure with a four-man rush, he's dropped down to a 53.3 PFF passing grade, and when he's blitzed, a 55.7 PFF passing grade, which I believe is the 30th graded quarterback in the entire NFL. A strong weakness here for this Detroit Lions offense, and Jared Goff in particular, is when they are blitzed, and an even bigger weakness for them is when they get pressured with a four-man rush. The Broncos aren't that great at generating pressure with a four-man rush, but they are absolutely phenomenal at blitzing, and so the Lions, I feel like, are going to have a game plan in order to counter the Broncos' blitzes. Ben Johnson, the Lions offensive coordinator, is going to have a really fun chess match here with Vance Joseph. I feel like both of those guys could be potential head coaching candidates as we head into this next coming coaching cycle. Who would have thought Vance Joseph going from potentially getting fired to now potentially getting poached as a head coaching candidate? But I feel like Ben Johnson is going to have to do some things in order to really counter the Broncos' blitzes. And the obvious one, like I talked about earlier, is running the football with their two phenomenal running backs in Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. The second one is obviously hot routes, where they throw into the blitz, just quick little stop routes throwing into the blitz, something super simple that could really be exploited for this Denver Broncos defense, obviously, that they're really blitz happy. And then there's some other things they can do as well, like dial up deep shots and just hope that Jared Goff can hang in the pocket for 1 second and just hang in there, allow him to hit the back foot of his drop and launch one deep to a guy like Jamison Williams, or even the former Bronco and speedster Khalif Raymond. Those guys could be big exploiters for this Detroit Lions offense when it comes to countering the Denver Broncos blitzes. So that's something I'm going to look for. Another thing I'm going to look for is David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, especially in the passing game, because if you were to get David Montgomery or Jahmyr Gibbs matched up on Alex Singleton on like a Texas route or a flat route or something like that, that could spell trouble for this Denver Broncos team, because we all know that Alex Singleton's biggest shortcomings are coverage and tackling. So that really does feel like a big mismatch here for this Detroit Lions offense, and that's something that Ben Johnson knows he has in his back pocket here. Our defense rush the quarterback. Our offense run, then throw. I feel like that's kind of the short version of it, but the Broncos may have to figure out how to drop more guys into coverage, maybe drop 8 guys into coverage and only bring a 3-man rush on certain situations, especially if Detroit starts to figure out the Broncos' blitzes a little bit more. I worry that this Detroit offense is going to be able to move the ball against the Denver Broncos defense, and I think Ben Johnson's going to come out with a game plan that's heavily pressed predicated on running the football, going on these long drives, and keeping the ball out of the hands of Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos offense, and obviously just wearing out the Denver Broncos defense over time. And by the end of the game, they're hoping that they can take advantage of that and rip away with a multi-score lead. The Broncos cannot afford to settle for field goals on offense. They're going to have to score touchdowns to keep up with this potentially high-scoring Detroit Lions offense. I don't know how Jeudy is going to bounce back from that crap performance last week. I mean, he's going to have to, but at the same time, I think the Broncos may start going in another direction in terms of guys they're going to feature offensively. Maybe this is the week. I keep saying it every single week, but maybe this is the week that we do see more Marvin Mims. Maybe this is the week that we see more Brandon Johnson. I feel like the Broncos can't really depend on Jerry Jeudy moving forward after that Chargers game that he had. So I really think that we could very well see guys like Brandon Johnson and Marvin Mims step up into an even more extended role to take some pressure off of Courtland Sutton, who is really getting just the lion's share of all of the coverage. He's getting so many looks on offense, and the Lions defense, although their secondary is not that good, they are going to try to take Courtland Sutton away. They're going to double team him. They're going to put safeties on him. So that's going to have to leave guys like Jeudy, Brandon Johnson, and Marvin Mims to step up. And then obviously Lucas Kroll as well, who was elevated from the practice squad. He has officially been signed to the active roster, and Ronnie Perkins was waived and then signed back onto the practice squad. So now Lucas Kroll is officially on the 53-man roster full time, and there's a chance that he could have a more extended role in this offense as sort of a sneaky player that maybe this Detroit Lions defense isn't accounting for. This Lions secondary has really been reeling, so I feel like the Broncos offense in theory could do almost whatever they want. We got Chewy Trevino in the house saying Cortland to score 2 today. Let's go. I definitely would love to see that. We got Five Nights at Freddy's in the house saying, Gage, can I be part of the Jaquan McMillan fan club? Absolutely. Absolutely. I can't even really take full responsibility for that one. I feel like Jaleel McLaughlin, if he finally comes back into form a little bit, I can take responsibility for that one. But the Jaquan McMillan fan club, absolutely. Everyone is invited to the Jaquan McMillan fan club and the Jaleel McLaughlin fan club if he one day is able to come back into form. David says, every team we played could move the ball. It's true, man. It's true. And the Broncos have done a good job of containing that. But again, I just feel like the Broncos are going to have to be a little bit more with their ears pinned back against this Lions offense that have multiple different ways that they can exploit you. And coming off of a game where they had some turnovers and just some overall struggles last week against the Chicago Bears, you know that they're going to want to have a bounce back performance because they do not want to let other teams back into the potential NFC North title. Obviously, Minnesota losing today was a big blow there, but even Green Bay, if they were to get their stuff together, could be knocking on the door here. So the Minnesota Vikings are a team that they really aren't going to be a big threat, I feel like, down the line, especially with their quarterback situation, but Green Bay could be, and Detroit obviously already lost to them once this season. They could be scared of them knocking on their door potentially. So Detroit could be in for a game where they want to keep their foot on the gas, but you know that Denver is going to want this game even more, especially after Cincinnati ended up winning this previous game. And right now, I believe Indianapolis is still up on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yep, they furthered their lead. It's now 24-13 with 5.5 minutes left to go in the third quarter. The Broncos actually kind of needed Pittsburgh to win this game, but obviously, it really didn't matter too much. I think it's only like a 3 or 4 percentage swing. The big game today is the Denver Broncos taking care of business against the Detroit Lions. DS says the Lions defense is horrible. It is horrible, but I feel like even a horrible unit could go out there and have a big game. So the Broncos have to be on their P's and Q's. They cannot afford to get diminished against a Aaron Glenn coach defense. This is a coaching staff Sean Payton's very familiar with a lot of their tendencies. So on paper, this Broncos offense should be able to go in there and do whatever they want. But football isn't played on paper. It's played in practice. So we'll see what happens, man. It's definitely going to be interesting for sure. I feel like in terms of what this Broncos offense is going to have to do, obviously establishing the ground game with Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, and Samaje Perine, getting Perine involved as a pass catcher out of the backfield, going on long extended drives, and maybe setting up that big play action play. Marvin Mims, this could be the game where we finally see the big post to him, maybe the big go route to him or something like that. Marvin Mims, if you look at his overall route tree, he's not getting open on routes other than go routes too often. So maybe if we were to get him lined up on the outside, press man coverage against one of the Lions DBs, that could be an opportunity to finally get that big play to Marvin Mims. That is certainly a possibility. Also, I feel like we're going to obviously have to see if Brandon Johnson can get a more elevated role. He's another speedster. We already talked about Lucas Kroll, but it's all going to start with the Denver Broncos establishing the run game offensively. If they are able to do that, then I feel like that's going to bode really, really well for the overall theme of this game. You keep underestimating the Lions defense. People said we would run up on Houston, and look what happened. I never said we would run up on Houston. I never said that. Here's what we're going to have to take into account here. The Lions only really have one strong pass rusher, and that's Aiden Hutchinson. Aiden Hutchinson is going to get a lot of attention on whatever side he's rushing on from the tight ends. They're going to be chipping. I wouldn't be surprised if Aiden Hutchinson is rushing off Mike McGlinchey's side, that the Broncos put two tight ends in there, and Adam Troutman and Chris Manhertz, to really help him out, because leaving Mike McGlinchey on an island against Will Anderson in that Houston game did not bode well for this Denver Broncos team. So I feel like that's going to be the big key to stopping this Detroit Lions defense, is neutralizing Aiden Hutchinson. Make one of their other pass rushers beat you. And if we come over here and take a look at the Detroit Lions depth chart when it comes to pass rushers, they're pretty short-handed. They've got Hutch, and that's about it. You've got Julian Okwara, you've got Romeo Okwara, Josh Paschal, John Kaminsky. On the interior, Benito Jones, Isaiah Buggs, Levi Onwuzurike, Broderick Martin, the former first-round draft bust Charles Harris. Their inside linebackers, they've got Alex Anzalone, Jack Campbell, Derek Barnes, and then a couple of nice depth guys, Malcolm Rodriguez and Jalen Reeves-Maben. But none of those guys are really household names, and none of those guys really stick out to you as world beaters on defense. So, again, in theory, this is a matchup that bodes well for the Denver Broncos on offense. We've got Ray in the house. How are you doing, Ray? Antelope says, I'm out for a bit. Go ahead, man. Hopefully we see you back in here before the game stream officially gets started. Denver signed Kroll to the 53-man roster. Merlo said, yes, they did, and he probably might see a more elevated role on offense. The Broncos anticipated having Greg Dulcich back for this game, but he ended up injuring his foot in the first practice back. So I think that means Lucas Kroll is going to take that role on, and I might think that we could see Lucas Kroll with like 4 or 5 catches in this game. It would not surprise me at all. If we force Goff to try to beat us with his arm, there might be some interceptions and turnovers. Just with the style of defense that the Denver Broncos play, they are going to generate opportunities to create turnovers. I feel like they're going to be able to hit Jared Goff at least once, and he's going to put the ball on the ground at least once. The question is, will the Denver Broncos be able to jump on those? They weren't able to do that against the Houston Texans, and that's part of the reason why they lost that game. They were able to do that against the Chargers, and that was one of the many reasons why they dominated against the Chargers. So the key there, with this aggressive style of blitzing defense, you're going to be able to get home. It's just, are you going to be able to jump on those balls? And then in terms of forcing interceptions, obviously the Broncos do have 2 really good DBs when it comes to ball hawking interceptions. Actually 3 in Justin Simmons, Jaquan McMillan, and Pat Surtain. But this Lions offense does have some guys that can out-physical you. Amon-Ra St. Brown can do that. Not so much with Jamison Williams, but Josh Reynolds certainly can. And then Sam Laporta, their tight end. We haven't even talked about him yet. Sam Laporta is a seam-ripping tight end, and sometimes Broncos DBs could be in position to get an interception, but the receiver just out-physicals them. So I feel like these interceptions for the Broncos could almost come in bunches, but we've seen a really consistent flow of turnovers for this Broncos team in the fumble department, and that's where I feel like it's going to continue. Jared Goff has a really bad tendency to turn his back to the defense and spin around to try to get out of trouble, and he's not Kyler Murray, he's not prime Russell Wilson, he's not able to get out of those consistently. So whenever he does that, that's generally when the Broncos will have the opportunity to create some of those fumbles. That's what I could very easily see here. We got Dark Green Marine in the house saying, how's it going, sir? I'm pumped for the game. I'm super pumped for the game, too. We're just going over the overall matchup for this Denver Broncos offense against the Detroit Lions defense, and how I feel like this Denver Broncos defense is going to have to maybe change their game plan a little bit and not be as aggressive with these blitzes in order to beat this Detroit Lions offense, because again, as I talked about earlier in the show, I think that Ben Johnson is going to have a game plan that's predicated around the Denver Broncos blitzing. I'm wondering if Vance Joseph is going to come out of left field here and maybe drop more guys into coverage. That's something that remains to be seen. We win this, we're going to the playoffs, Bobby Bottom says. YVZ says, I feel like Russell Wilson will have 3 touchdowns, 2 to Sutton and 1 to Brandon Johnson. Will I be right? We'll see. Yep, absolutely. If Russell Wilson has 3 touchdowns today, I will feel very confident about the Denver Broncos winning this game. If the Lions offense ends up scoring touchdowns, the Broncos are going to have to score touchdowns of their own in order to counter that, obviously. The Broncos cannot afford to kick field goals in this game, so I do feel like overall, this Broncos offense, if they do want to win, they're going to have to be able to score in the red zone, which they've done a good job of throughout this entire game. I just had my fellow Syndicate co-host Donovan, one of the co-hosts of Miami Dolphins Syndicate, send a message in the group chat that says, it's crazy how the Dolphins made the Broncos a good team. It's true, man. You think back to that Miami Dolphins game, that's the game that really spurned all the changes that turned this Broncos defense from one of the worst units in the NFL to one of the best. Also, it was the first half of the Chicago Bears game as well that turned around from the first half to the second half, but it all started with that Miami game, moving on from obviously Randy Gregory, who's one of the worst edge rushers in the NFL. Even in San Francisco, the dude's barely cracking any playing time. That was a big good move from the Denver Broncos, moving on from Randy Gregory, and then obviously moving on from Essane Bassey and bringing in Jaquan McMillan. Jaquan McMillan is a breakout star for this Denver Broncos defense. He's somebody that the team should think about potentially giving a pay extension to long term, although they can keep him around through tags and through like exclusive rights free agency deals and restricted free agency deals through the next few years. But I think the Broncos may want to do right by Jaquan McMillan and extend him and give him a little bit more of a pay raise long term. I think that we could very well see that. Where's Troutman? Why Kroll over Troutman? Just in terms of like who could be explosive, because I feel like Lucas Kroll's a more explosive player than Adam Troutman is. All right, guys, I think the inactives are probably out by now, so let's go ahead and bring this up here. All right, so Ben DiNucci was elevated from the practice squad. I feel like the Broncos are doing that to sort of reward him. He gets a game check for this, if I'm not mistaken, and he gets another game towards being a vested veteran in the NFL, and that comes with a pension and more long-term benefits. So I feel like the Broncos are kind of throwing Ben DiNucci a bone here by doing this and calling him up from the practice squad, even though he's not going to be active on game day. And I know some people are curious if he can be active as the third quarterback. Unfortunately not, because he's not a full-time member of the 53-man roster. You can't call up your practice squad quarterback, at least with a standard elevation, and then make them your emergency third-string quarterback. That's a little quirk in the rules that the NFL made sure wasn't going to be able to happen. JL Skinner is going to be inactive probably the whole season. This is basically a redshirt year for him. We've got Nick Bonito, obviously, with his knee injury, unable to make it this week. I'm a little bit more hopeful maybe for next week against the New England Patriots with a little bit longer resting time. We've got Nate Atkins down, which is a little bit interesting. Obviously, he made the active roster coming into the year and had a bit of a more extended role as we got at the early part of the season, and then as we've gone more and more into the season, I feel like Nate Atkins' role has kind of diminished a little bit. Ben Neiman, the special teams linebacker, is inactive. Alex Forsyth, rookie center, and then Elijah Garcia as well. The Broncos did call up Tyler Lancaster from the practice squad, maybe to give them a little bit more reinforcement in the run defense. That tells me that the Broncos do have a pretty good idea of how this Lions offense wants to attack them, and that's by running the ball down their throat with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, who are both having absolutely sensational seasons. We got Broncos fans saying Steelers and Texans look weak. Now we can pounce on the other teams. He also says Kroll is faster than Greg. Garcia is inactive. Why? I feel like the Broncos just, at this point in time, are treating this year as almost like a redshirt year for Elijah Garcia. I was hoping that he would get some playing time this year because he played really, really well in the preseason. But right now, they're depending on guys such as Matt Henningsen up front, Mike Purcell, who I actually think has done a pretty good job over the last couple of weeks. And then this week, obviously, they called up Tyler Lancaster to give him a little bit more reinforcement in the run game. Isaac says, thank God, no offense to Turner Yell, but he's not that good, asking if PJ Locke is in. Yep, PJ Locke is indeed in. He suffered a little bit of I believe, a windpipe injury. They called it a neck injury, but according to Andrew Mason of 104.3 The Fan, he was struggling to talk a little bit after the Chargers game and may have gotten like a foot on his windpipe or something like that, but he is indeed good to go. Gage, I love to stay and watch, but I got to head to work. Go Broncos. Have a good one, Isaac. Hopefully you have a good one. And go Broncos, man. I cannot talk today. Where do we stand playoff-wise if we win this game? Let's go ahead and bring up the New York Times playoff simulator here. Just give me 1 second, guys. Got to click through an ad right quick. There we go. All right, so right now, according to the New York Times playoff simulator, the Denver Broncos have a 42% chance to make the playoffs. If the Broncos win this game, that will shoot all the way up to a 5% chance to make the playoffs. If they lose this game, however, our playoff odds drop back down into the 20s, unfortunately. So this feels like a little bit more of a must-win game than it was a little bit earlier into the week because of the Cincinnati Bengals ending up taking care of business there over the Minnesota Vikings. Oh, that actually wasn't even marked yet right here, so we'll go ahead and change that real quick. Bengals got the win. Right now, the Indianapolis Colts look like they're pretty well on their way to a win. So if the Denver Broncos take care of business, then it will be a 61% chance to make the playoffs. If we lose, again, it drops back down into the 20s. So this is one that we really need to take care of business here. However, if we lose and then win out on our final 3 games, our playoff odds go up to 95%. So that almost guarantees it. So the Broncos do have a path to winning or to going to the playoffs if they don't win this game, but they basically lose out on any chance to win the AFC West if they end up losing this game. So in order to keep their division championship hopes alive, then they're going to have to win this game. And I still feel like the Broncos have pretty good playoff chances even if they don't make it, but they would have to win out in order to do so. If the Broncos, in theory, were to win this game and maybe get upset Week 18 against the Raiders, they've actually still got pretty decent odds. Drops down into the high 70s, low 80s based on 17,000 simulations. So the Broncos will have some games to give if they beat the Lions, but their most direct path to making the playoffs involves beating the Lions, if that makes any sense. It's getting confusing on who I need to root for. All right, so we'll go through it real quick for the rest of the week. Let's just assume that the Denver Broncos take care of business this week. According to the New York Times playoff simulator, all of these slightly orange-shaded opponents right here are the teams that we really need to root for. So we need the Bears to somehow beat the Browns, which I think is actually a little bit more realistic. What was the other one it said? It was the Cowboys over the Bills, the Bears over the Browns. And then, sorry, let me go ahead and take those out. My fault. So if we take care of business, we need the Titans to beat the Texans. We need the Patriots to beat the Chiefs, which we all know is not going to happen. We need the Jets to beat the Dolphins. Ravens to beat the Jags. And I believe that covers all of the opponents that have an AFC matchup. So our rooting guide for this week is obviously Broncos over Lions. Colts looks like they're going to take care of business here. Bears over Browns. Titans over Texans, Jets over Dolphins, Patriots over Chiefs, Cowboys over Bills, and then Ravens over Jaguars. That is the Denver Broncos rooting guide for this week. If all of that stuff happens, the Denver Broncos playoff odds will shoot up to 73%. All right, Broncos country, I am going to go ahead and dip out of here. We are going at just about the 30-minute mark here for the pregame show. We got D-Rock in the house saying, Gage in chat, let's freaking go. Before we dip out of here, guys, let's go ahead and give your official predictions for this game. I'm still, unfortunately, going to stand true with my prediction from yesterday's pregame preview. I do think that the Detroit Lions are going to overmatch the Denver Broncos 31-24. I am worried that the Lions are going to have a good game plan offensively by running the football and trying to neutralize the Denver Broncos pass rush and the Denver Broncos blitzing game. And I have some concerns if Russell Wilson and this offense can really step up to the plate, and outscore this Detroit Lions offense. So I feel like at the end of the day, this Denver Broncos team, if they do win, which I think there is a very realistic scenario where they do, that propels them into potential chances to win the AFC West, especially if Kansas City stumbles in a couple of their final games. But if not, they still have pretty strong chances of making the playoffs. We got WVZ saying 31-27 Broncos win. We got Antelope saying, unfortunately, I think the Lions win 27-24. We got Devin saying 31-20 Lions. We got Dark Green Marine saying the Broncos 27-24. We got D-Rock saying the Denver Broncos 29, Detroit Lions 23. DS says Broncos will win. Bobby Bottoms agrees. So looks like we kind of have a little bit of a split crowd right now. I know I will certainly be over the moon if the Denver Broncos take care of business here, and I'll own some Syndicate bragging rights over Derek, host of Detroit Lions Syndicate, my main business partner here on the Syndicate. So that's a little friendly bet that Derek and I have, is some Syndicate bragging rights. So pull for the Denver Broncos for those Syndicate bragging rights. All right, Broncos country, before we dip out of here, please be sure to leave a like on this video, as well as subscribe and ring the bell so these videos appear in your notification feed. I would really appreciate it, guys. Those are two free and easy ways to show your support, helps tell YouTube's algorithm to push us out, and helps us get seen by more and more members of Broncos country just like you and me. And until next time, guys, we will see you here in about an hour for the official game stream, where we'll have live play-by-play, highlights, game sound, all that good stuff. So please be sure to tune in. I'm your host,